So welcome today to our Is Wellbeing Truly Embedded in Your Organisation's Strategy virtual boardroom. Heck, that's a mouthful. It's being facilitated by HR Recruit and Marion Hewitt. My name's Jo Thompson and I'm a consultant for HR Recruit. I'm joined today by Marion, who will introduce herself shortly. In today's event, Marion will assess the true strategic positioning of wellbeing in your organisation by identifying strengths, gaps and hidden risks in current approaches. If you've got any burning questions during the session, then please put them into the chat box and we will cover them at the end. I'm now going to hand you over to Marion, who will introduce herself and start the event. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. It's really nice to be with you again. I've done many of these sessions with Jo over, I don't know, 5 years or so now. And this one, I wanted just to think more about that strategic approach to wellbeing. My background was a lot of years within HR and developed more of a specialist interest in wellbeing with mental health and positive psychology over recent times. And what I really want us to have the opportunity to think about today is how we are taking that proper strategic approach to wellbeing. You know, wellbeing has evolved and our understanding of it has evolved. The business case is getting an increasing body of evidence. So I really want us to take this chance to actually have a bit of a reflection on our organisation, and then opportunity for you to take things back to think about how your organisation works. So just a very quick poll, if that's all right. Jo, if you want to get the first one, really just your instinctive response. Would you say wellbeing is fully embedded in your organisation? So we've got a yes or no or a not sure. See what
me? Did you ask me, Jo?
Jo. Sorry, Jo. Yeah. So we just launched the poll, so the poll should have come up onto your screen now.
Oh, okay. Sorry. Let me have a look.
Yeah, I've just launched that now.
Yeah.
Chat in the chat, is it?
No, it should have come. The poll one should have come up.
Sorry, I think I'm being a bit thick here. I can't see it.
So I don't know what screen you've got. Have you got gallery view with lots of people showing? And then on the screen, it should come up poll one, right? Has other people got it? Are other people seeing it?
Yeah. There's quite a few answered, yeah.
Sorry.
It just popped up as a little mini window.
Click on chat.
Oh, okay.
Just keep it going for another moment.
Craig says he's popped up as another window. Thank you for that.
Well, we'll get a snapshot, even if all of you don't manage, don't worry. It's just to get a bit of an in, just keep it going for a few more moments.
There's a few other people just joining now, Marion.
Okay. Sorry, you're on to multitask in numerous directions, aren't you?
If you've just joined us, Marion's put a poll on if you do want to answer the poll.
Just give it another moment, and then if you want to share the results, Jo, that'd be great. Please.
Yes. Can you see those?
Yeah, brilliant. So yeah, we got a bit of a mix. So as I was expecting, really, and it'd be interesting to see if perhaps your answers change a bit or thinking changes as we go through. What I've created that can go alongside this is a questionnaire that you can take and download and have a reflection on. I'm loosely going through it in the session, so there's a QR code there if you wanted to scan it. Jo will also put another link into the chat if you want to use that. So just something that you can download either now or later. But what I'm interested in, you know, how did you make that initial assessment as to whether you thought it was embedded? What was it you were thinking about around that? Is it how it's part of your wider strategy? Is it about the initiatives you're thinking about? So, and the CIPD found on their survey, the 2025, that only 28% of organisations say their wellbeing approach is fully integrated, but 74% claim it's a business priority. So we're getting a bit of a mismatch in terms of what's actually happening. So what I want to think about a bit more today is, what does a strategic approach mean? Perhaps a bit more thinking about where are we now, how data can be helping us, and any particular tools and next steps that might be useful for us. So multiple ways we'll be thinking about how is wellbeing embedded. my take on wellbeing, wellbeing is our individual well-being is impacted by every element of our experience at work. So I'd like, this is just sort of a thought about what organisational wellbeing maturity is, how the approach is. Organisational wellbeing maturity is how far your organisation has made good work and timely support part of how work gets done every day, by designing jobs that don't harm health, equipping managers to help early, and using real data to keep improving. So you meet your duty of care, include everyone fairly, and perform better as a business. Or in fewer words, it's how consistently you create healthy work and quick support in everyday practice. There is an increasing business case. If some of you attended a session I did a few months ago, these two slides related to both. So we are seeing there is evidence of the cost of poor health, poor employee well-being. There is a cost to organisations to that. And all of those, in my view, are actually pretty difficult to accurately quantify, but we're getting some data. But what we have also got now is that increasing research that is showing us that actually when there is good levels of employee and workplace well-being, every performance metric in terms of the organisation is increased. So this was a huge scale study, over 20 million people crowdsourced with Indeed, working with Oxford University, and found this direct link. And when they looked at the organisations, so that Wellbeing 100 of the sample, the 100 organisations where employees had the highest score for wellbeing, you can see on this graph, so the clarity is not hugely great, you can see that those organisations consistently performed higher against every stock market indicator from all other organisations. So, we are now getting that broader business case, which is so important for us being able to really get leadership buy-in and getting that wider commitment. So part of, I think, what we need to think about is how we separate employee well-being and workplace well-being, because they are different things, but they're very much interlinked. And I like the idea of employee well-being as being the seed, but workplace well-being is the soil. Now, if you want your plant to flourish, then you look after the soil that it is growing in. You might like the analogy, you might not, but actually it's thinking about if you give somebody a healthy environment in which to grow, they will build better. So actually the environment we are creating at work will either support and enable well-being, or it can hinder and increase symptoms like stress and anxiety. So thinking about where does your approach, are you putting a lot of emphasis on the reactive and the proactive? Are you thinking more about the employees, or are you taking that broader perspective of the workplace? How are all the elements of my experience, somebody's experience of work? So if you had to put one word to describe your current wellbeing culture in your organisation, what would that be? If anybody wants to stick any words into the chat, be interested in seeing what comes up. Single word to describe your current wellbeing culture. Perhaps you consider it's very proactive, reactive, tokenistic, integral, well-intended. I like that. Yes, and I think that's often interesting range of words here. Thank you. Yes. Reactive, yeah. Mixed, supportive, in development, yeah. So thank you. So we have got a mix, and we want obviously to have that more proactive approach. So we need wellbeing to be in the boardroom. We need it to be part of being a business enabler. We need it not to be something that sits just within HR and is something that HR get to when they've got time. It actually has to be really integral to business decisions. When there are big decisions are being made, do you consider the wellbeing implications, or is it a reactive add-on? Is it part of any impact assessment or a risk assessment? how do you build it into a change management program? And I don't mean, you know, giving details of the EAP when you put people on notice of redundancy. I'm thinking about how do you do a range of skill training to help people deal with uncertainty? How do you ensure that the communications are clear and open to try and reduce levels of anxiety? So consider all the ways these things would impact individual well-being. Does well-being get into board level reports? And I don't just mean the absence data. Some of you saw the wellbeing metrics document we've covered before. You know, there's lots of data. Often there's not a very, you can't directly show an ROI, but there is such an interconnection between different aspects of data and employee performance and wellbeing. So just think about where does it sit in terms of the boardroom? How is it discussed? And then think a bit more about how is well-being lived as an everyday experience at work. And here I was thinking around the elements of culture, the elements of psychological safety, the elements of inclusion, because they all feed into how we feel at work and about work. You know, that culture is that, you know, lived experience in itself. But how do you actually make sure that that is creating that ability for people to talk openly? We know that what things about culture are increasingly important for different demographics in terms of what they're looking for at work. So certain Gen Z and millennials want meaningful work-life balance. They want psychological safety, and they are putting mental health and support available above status and salary when they're job hunting. And they will research culture before applying. So actually, you know, the employer brand, the culture is a vital part of your wider reputation. The psychological safety, Edmondson's work about where people feel safe to speak up, and a lack of psychological safety increases anxiety and stress, so has a very detrimental effect. Are managers confident to speak up and check in with staff, or to escalate things when they're concerned? We know aligning inclusion with well-being strengthens belonging and again reduces turnover. When people don't feel included or they experience stigma, it obviously has a negative impact on their well-being. And when we're also thinking about inclusion, actually, it's also about that how accessible and available are all the initiatives we're offering. Are we creating things that if you think of, you know, if you were to pick people out in all the demographics and all the different roles, the geographical locations, you know, are they all getting access to a range of supports that work for them? Are you meeting all the different needs in the things that you're offering, or are you inadvertently excluding people? So I'd like you to think about that a bit more potentially. And then the actual systems, the actual interventions. So if we're building a culture, we're getting conversations happening in the boardroom, but then we do need those interventions alongside that. And research by the World Wellbeing Movement, they identified, you know, the drivers of well-being, and actually the interventions that were most effective were those that were clearly aligned with those drivers of well-being. So what are you currently offering? And in line with what I was just saying about inclusion, identify if there are any gaps. Are that you offering things that are proactive as well as reactive? So, you know, clear stress risk assessments, not just the EAP if people are feeling stressed. Have you considered having everybody having a wellness action plan as a proactive approach to enabling their wellness? We're not just introducing reactive wellbeing recovery plans when people are experiencing poor health. So looking at the things that actually are the forward looking, they're not those things that are about how you help people overcome ill health, which we need, but actually how we help people feel better, be engaged, and move towards that flourishing and thriving, those states that we work towards when we are considering positive psychology. So thinking around that, all the things that you are providing on that. And, you know, a part of that, we do also have to look at the ROI on those different things. Are we spending our budget in the right places? Are they giving us what we need? So look at all of the things that you are offering. Are they meeting everybody's needs? And have you got that balance of reactive and proactive? Because we can see from that data here, actually you get a much better return when you're looking forward. And then the importance of managing risk and building confidence. That's also part of that wider strategic approach. Every ER case, every HR leader, every business will carry unseen risk if well-being isn't effectively managed. In real terms, there's a risk from discrimination claims under the Equality Act if people are experiencing significant mental illness, so they qualify under that. But apart from that, you're still managing risks around productivity and performance and wider reputational risks if people are not feeling well, if they're not able to show up as themselves, or if they are actually unwell. How confident are you individually, as managers collectively, as leaders, as a business, and actually supporting those complex wellbeing issues, those complex ER issues? You know, so many of the cases that we find ourselves dealing with within ER these days, there will be elements of health and mental illness and health that come into that. So are we really confident in terms of managing risk that we have been able to provide the real support that we need to, you know, really working collaboratively to provide the right support for people. So think about all those different areas, and there's questions on that assessment questionnaire that I've given you the opportunity to download that will tell you some more. The slides are available there as well. I can see a couple of questions have come in, but I'll look at those when we get to the end. So we want to think about, where have we got gaps? So our well-being is going to be as strong as the weakest area. So if we've got bits that are getting in the way, then we're going to be struggling in our overall approach to well-being. So where would you say, in terms of your organisation, is the biggest link? So if the competence is around knowing what to do. The consistency is, are you doing it reliably? And what I mean as organisations, not targeting individuals. And confidence, you know, believing it matters and feeling safe to act. So, you know, if things are finding difficulty to get traction on things, it's rarely because of lack of intent. Some of the, I think the first word that came up in the chat was well-intended. You know, people that want to support others, organisations, you know, the people that are here today, definitely, you know, we want to be proactively supporting people, but somehow sometimes things don't get the traction, they don't get buy-in. I was doing some mental health first aid training earlier, and, you know, one of the things we were discussing was, you know, how you get people to talk openly, particularly, you know, in certain types of organisations, certain sectors, when you've got really big barriers to people feeling able to talk openly. So if we break these down and just think a bit more about what do we need to build these three up, so that we've got a strong chain. So the competence, that's about the skills and the knowledge. Do leaders and managers really know what good looks like when it comes to well-being? How are you identifying it? Are you doing it based on your well-being score? Are you on your engagement score? Are you doing it based on turnover? Are you doing it on organisational profit? You know, what are you actually looking for as measures of when it comes to well-being? And I haven't got a particular answer to that. It's actually when you know your organisation, what is actually going to tell you that actually you've got to a good place. Do you have that clear understanding of the well-being risks? What are the early signs of things causing difficulty? Is there the competence to have the effective conversations and interpret data around well-being? Are managers avoiding conversations because they don't feel they have the skills to do it? Is data collected, but are you really analysing it so it drives strategy? So, you know, ensure you're really comfortable with using the data well. So yeah, thinking about the different things that will help increase competence across everybody in the organisation in relation to that. And then the consistency, if you like, the policy to practice gap. Is it happening reliably? Does the organisation do what it says it does? And is it happening consistently across teams and time? Are people, doing things practically for their well-being when things are stressful as well as when things are relatively calm? One of the models of well-being that I like is by somebody called Dodge, and she talks about we have well-being when we have a balance between the challenges we face and the resources we have available, whether physical, mental, or social. And what often happens is when our challenges are going up, we're putting all our resources into those challenges, and actually we don't then put our equal effort into replenishing our resources, so our well-being becomes out of alignment. So how are we making sure we are consistently enabling people to look after their own well-being? Also, consistently across teams. Are some teams in your organisation managing to create and develop and practice a good work-life balance, whatever you decide that means, whereas perhaps others are more sort of working extreme hours and almost glorifying that overwork culture? Is it happening consistently? Are initiatives happening throughout the year, or are there peaks and troughs? You have a splurge of things after an engagement survey results, but then it sort of fades away? Are you building accountability into things? You've got the policies there, but are the managers all familiar with them and applying them consistently? Some research by Robertson and Cooper in 2023 argued that the key predictor of wellbeing success is organisational consistency, where wellbeing practices are systemised, not situational. So thinking about that. And that can be challenging in organisations where you've got very different parts of the organisation, where you might have, office-based people, you might have production people, field salespeople, how you actually get that. So in a way, sort of equality, that is getting that balance, equality, consistency, how you make it a good experience well-being wise for all people. We also know from research by Gallup that employees also have much higher engagement if they feel that there's fairness in how well-being is supported. So think about, how is well-being embedded in everyday practices? And then that confidence bit. So that's about confidence of people to do the things that they think are right or want to do, and actually the confidence in terms of the psychological safety that we feel. When people know what to do they actually feel empowered to do it and supported to do it? Do we have a culture that says don't look at emails in the evening, but actually we've got people still sending emails, so we feel we have to respond? Do people feel able to leave on time, or is the culture suggesting they have to stay later? So are they feeling empowered to actually do things that are good for their well-being? I remember doing some work with an organisation a little while ago, and it was with the leadership team, because what they had as feedback was, you're telling us to do all these things, but you're not doing them. And actually what they then got together and did was actually created the commitments themselves, that they would then be modelling the things that they were saying that the rest of the employees could do. And actually that gave the safety, the real safety, to actually do the things that were helpful for well-being. So thinking about how the things that are increasing that sense of safety, are leaders role modelling the behaviours, are conversations happening in ways that create that space for people to feel they can talk openly? Do managers feel equipped to do that? So the competence is about knowing what to do. The consistency is doing it reliably. The confidence is believing it matters. And those links are actually mutually reinforcing, because if the competence is weak, people won't know what they should be doing. If consistency is missing, then the efforts lose all impact. And actually, if there's low confidence, even the best intentions actually won't happen. So we want to have that get all of those links strong to be able to do that. So I'm just interested if you were to think about your organisation, where would you think at the moment you would need to put more effort? Where's the weakest link at the moment for you? Jo, are you able to try the second poll, please?
Yeah, just one sec.
Just interested as you're reflecting through what struck you as the area perhaps that you could put more effort in. What's your biggest gap? The competence across the organisation. So this isn't about you. This is collectively as an organisation. Where would you say that fits? Is it an issue with things happening consistently? So you've got the support of some managers, others are still to be convinced that wellbeing and supporting mental health is beneficial and creating those good work environments. And then the confidence. So we'll just keep that going for a few more and see minutes and see what response we get. Okay, do you want to stick the results up, Joan, please? Nice, and so we got a real split on that. So as I would expect. So just have that as a reflection in terms of where you want to actually put some resources and some time. When I mean resources, I don't necessarily mean it doesn't have to be money. So let's move on to think of another area that you might want to consider in terms of gaps. In terms of data insight, impact of wider factors, and management capability. So where do you think there might be blockers in your organisation, or where can you do more that you can to help in those gaps? You say this is all about how we're really looking at these strategically. So the data insight bit is where, have you really collected the data that you can? Is it being interpreted and acted upon? Remember the checklist I've shared with you before. So how we are transferring wellbeing data into meaningful business intelligence. So, and using that in a proactive way, not always reactive, focusing on how you can support people to be well and to be in work. So, sometimes organisations are doing regular engagement surveys or pulse surveys, but there's no follow-up analysis that goes down by demographic or function, and there's no clear follow-up in terms of actions. Or perhaps you're not linking the metrics you've got to wider wellbeing performance. Are you trying to correlate customer service levels or accuracy accident reports with engagement scores and absences by department? Just look at the data with curiosity and intention in terms of what it can actually tell us. Why might that data be? Why might that figure be? Why might that department be different from that? What more can I find out about it? And really use that to inform what you wanted to do. So McKinsey research reported that companies that use integrated wellbeing analytics achieved up to a 20% improvement in retention and a 12% increase in productivity. CIPD found that only 33% of organisations actually integrate wellbeing data into their people strategy dashboards. So how are we using data in a meaningful and helpful way? And then the impact of wider factors. This is quite sort of an interesting one to think about it. Are we treating symptoms or causes? And some of the challenge around here is this is about external pressures. Sometimes it's about systemic pressures, and sometimes it can be about things that are actually outside our control. But are we taking account of them as far as we can? Where in terms of how it's impacting people. Looking at changes in demand impacts workload, and how are we evaluating work and job design to actually help people manage that? How can we look at why we might redesign some of the systems to help deal with the peaks and troughs? So think about, and all the things, wider societal things, significant competitive pressures, short-term pressures that might be impacting both your organisation and individuals. Looking at getting that breadth. So one research found that wellbeing programs addressing both individual and organisational factors sustained engagement 40% longer than individual level only interventions. So it's about having that broad approach to it. And then the manager capability. Managers are integral to so much of this. So that's the ability to really translate the strategy into daily leadership management behaviours. It's where that, back to the previous one, those policies becomes practice, and that's where it can become challenging. And I do think actually managers are in a really tough place, and I think this has become harder. I think probably the pandemic is what really started a lot more conversations around mental health, particularly wellbeing in wider. And there was suddenly this expectation of managers being able to have all these additional skills to identify signs and symptoms, to hold these supportive conversations, to put in all these things to support staff. And most managers want to do that. I choose to believe most managers want to do that, but they didn't suddenly develop all those skills to be able to do it. And within that, they are trying to support their team, but they have also got the pressures from higher up in terms of all the KPIs, service level agreements, whatever metrics and objectives they're having to meet. So actually, the well-being of managers themselves needs to be really looked after, because they can be in that tough place. So how do they do it? They don't suddenly have time to have all these conversations. How can it be made possible that they can make these meaningful conversations with people, these check-ins, how they create that environment where people feel able to sort of say, have you got 5 minutes? And actually the manager says yes, and creates and prioritizes that time. Have you put training in to help managers feel that they are confident to have those conversations? Often hear managers are wary because they don't feel equipped, or they're worried they'll say the wrong thing, or they'll open the can of worms, or they'll make everything worse by saying something. Whereas if we can encourage them to listen in the empathetic way, listen to understand, and then together in an empowered way help find solutions. Gallup identified that manager as responsible of 70% of variance in team engagement and well-being. And we've probably all had experiences over our working lives of managers that have made our work life feel, really good. We've increased our confidence, our self-esteem, and in turn, in well-being, because they're so intrinsically linked. And other times when we've had managers that we found harder and has had a detrimental effect. So I think, the management element of this is a really important part. And do managers in your organisation genuinely consider well-being as part of their role, or is it still considered when somebody's got poor well-being, actually they've got to support them to get better? We want that forward-looking, proactive approach if we're taking that really strategic focus. So looking at those 3 areas, data insight, knowing what's happening. If we don't have that, decisions will lack evidence. If we are not considering wider factors, the actions will lack context. And without that management capability, the intentions will just lack traction. Things just won't be able to happen. So think about where you think your organisation is really strong. And I'm sure, you will be doing things, you will have lots of areas of strength, but where actually you might be worth focusing a bit more attention to help things become really integrated, because a mature wellbeing strategy will integrate all of these elements. So just generally reflect on that. This I haven't done a poll, but just in the chat, just think about where you might identify as your gaps, where you think you might want to put more attention. So, if management capability comes top, then maybe, your strategy is going to depend on equipping your leaders. If data insight is lacking, it's making sure you're developing your well-being intelligence. And then if the impact of wider factors is something you're thinking about, then actually maybe at the moment you're being a bit too internally focused. So think a bit more about that. So I've gone through loads of areas. I know I've just sort of offloaded lots of ideas, which was kind of my intention in these broad brief sessions that we do over the lunchtime. But I want to give you a bit of an opportunity to reflect, where do you go from here? What are your top 3 wellbeing concerns right now? If you were to be, as I am asking you that question, what are the top 3 things that come to mind in terms of all the things that we've talked about? You look at the different questions on that questionnaire. What are the things that need, have you still got a lot of work to do to get real, genuine leadership buy-in? Who are your allies? Have you got that clear? Ownership at senior level, and I mean collective ownership. So it's part of all the business decisions. It's not somebody that has to sit there, with the wellbeing hat particularly. Actually, it's integral to everything. Where do you think you have the biggest opportunity to enhance wellbeing? And going back to that workplace, the soil, the plant bit, looking at all the drivers of well-being, thinking about every element of an experience of work, the HR conversation, the language is moving on a bit from engagement as being the top bar's term to, wider employee experience, and everything impacts that. So, your job design, the skills training, having the right technology, the level of contact having with colleagues, as well as all, the other policies, the flexible working, the hybrid working, all those things that are coming in. Are we thinking about all of those? Because everything has the potential to add to somebody's individual feeling of feeling well or detract from it. That I use it so often in training. I do. It's so very simplistic, but it's so true. That battery analogy. Everything that is positive adds charge into that battery, moves us in, keeps us in that green zone. Things that are causing us some level of stress, distress, are sapping that energy. And if we move down to that amber and that red zone, we cannot show up and perform in our best way at work. And if we're not doing that collectively, we can see the results at an organisational level. And if we're going back and we want to really get that business case, we want to get the full buy-in of all the leaders, then how are we going to demonstrate it? So look at the metrics, but look at the wider data. Look, perhaps you've got some industry, particularly specific data that you can draw on. Look up the Indeed results and use that, because actually we've got that real evidence that shows. I mean, listening to a podcast by one of the authors of that, and he's written a book about workplace well-being, and he sort of, I remember him saying, I'm actually almost embarrassed that I had to write the book. Why should we have to be justifying enabling employee well-being? Why should we have to be putting a case for making a workplace somewhere good to work? Which I thought was quite interesting to think about. So please give this some thought. You can download, you'll have the slides later that will give you a bit more of a prompt, and you've got the questionnaire. So with the session, I'm not trying to give you all the answers as much as mainly I want to prompt thinking. So you go away and do some further thinking. Just in terms of wider things that I do try workshops with senior leadership teams, actually to help them sort of tailor and think about their own pain points and what works, help them actually really understand that business case. Do a lot of mental health first aid training and a wide range of wellbeing webinars, particularly drawing on positive psychology, as well as the Unleashing You program. So it'd be great to hear from anybody who's interested in any of those. And I'm really pleased that you have prioritised this time. I know this is always a challenge in a busy work day. So thank you. I'm going to take the slides down and then we can look at any questions, or if anybody wants to ask any questions into the room, please do so. It'd be good to.
There's a couple of bits.
Yes.
Jeanette's asked, can you link ER cases, sickness rates, absence data, retention rates, etc., to employee wellbeing rates, i.e., high rates of ER cases and sickness rates, etc., to low rates of employee wellbeing?
I mean, so I'm just trying to find the question as well.
It's closer to the top.
I think to me, it's logical. So if you've got people experiencing high levels of stress, and then really try and help them understand I mean, yes, sometimes there'll be things outside work and that's causing a big area. So we don't have stress in compartments, in my view. We have an overall, ability to manage stress. Some people are more equipped to compartmentalize than others, but I think if you were to sit down with an employee and say, right, what about your work makes your work easy, and what are the things that create difficulty? So I think you can easily, you can break down, rates of absence and what the reasons are, but look at the analysis of ER cases. What are the sorts of things that you're dealing with are there? What are the themes? And how I'm not trying to pretend everything is linked to well-being. Sometimes other things happen, but I think it is always interesting to actually really look at the data, really, and when I talk about data, I mean quantitative and qualitative. That's asking people questions, really ask, when you're sitting down for your day's work, what is set up that means it's easy? Are the systems there? Have you got a clear flow? You've got the level of autonomy that you want? Have you got clear objectives so you know which things you should prioritize? Or do you feel you're being given multiple things that you all need to be done by yesterday? All of those things. So I think you can use them as all. And if you dig around on the data as well, the wider research, there is a lot of academic research out there now, which, whilst not be specific to your organisation, you can still use as evidence for these things.
Trishna has asked, what would the wellness action plan include, and is there a template that can be shared?
So I think this can kind of be what you want it to be. This can be, okay, so we want your work, you want to feel well at work. What will help you do this? So I think some of that you can do it as an individual, you can do it as team ones as well. So that can be things like, I will commit to ensuring I have a break at regular times. I will speak to my manager if things are feeling challenging, as well as helping them think about wider. I'm not saying that we should be taking ownership for everybody's wider well-being, and how people address that it is up to them. Some of it we can give information, but I think helping people have that proactive think about how am I supporting my own well-being. I do think that people have to take a level of individual ownership as well. This isn't all about the organisation can't make employees well. Actually, if you set up things, people have to buy into them. If you are telling people to do something or advising them, creating a culture, ultimately people have to decide, yes, I'm not going to look at my emails, I'm going to take them off my phone. I was doing a session with a group the other day, and she thought, why have I even got my work emails on my phone? I don't need them. But actually, if they're there, I'm going to look at them before I go to bed, and then I wonder why I don't sleep. So I think we're also looking at that, how we help people take that individual ownership. So I think the wellbeing action plans, that can actually be quite a nice activity to do as a team. Okay, we all want to feel a bit better. What are we going to say we're going to do? And that, as of itself, helps wellbeing, because that connection with other people, that collaboration, that accountability, all feed into it. And sometimes if you're trying to work out whether something is positive, actually think about, if that isn't there, what would be the impact of the absence of it? Does that make sense? Sorry, somebody was about to say something.
No, sorry, Marion. I thought you'd finished speaking. Yeah. I was going to ask the next question. Apologies.
Yeah, no, go on. What was the next one? Where are we?
Jeanette said that leadership engagement in is key. And how do you get sustained buy-in?
Keeping the conversation going and having data in there. So you start to normalize it. So when you're looking at the strategy, when you're looking at some new initiative, actually, certain public sector in particular, do impact assessments, which are largely around, well, exactly as it says. But actually, I think there's a lot of that we could learn in terms of, well, what's the well-being impact of this suggested change to the business? And I think it's just keeping the conversation going, providing data and normalizing it. I think sometimes we just don't think, it's not an intention. It's like, all the data about change programs fail, 70% of change programs fail because they don't take the people with them, and that should be so obvious, but we tend to get caught up with the process, the procedure, or the IT or whatever, and actually forget, actually, if this is going to succeed, we need these people to be engaged and understand and be well to be able to align with it for successful outcomes.
I was just smiling then. Jerry's put, the top one has to be more free cakes at lunchtime.
And I think that's kind of how do we get the balance? Because, cynically, when organisations are doing that wellbeing washing, that, it's a few things like that. But actually, that doesn't create the real difference. Yes, that's nice, and that's appreciative, and people will enjoy those sorts of things. But I was talking a while ago, an ambulance trust, and they were really trying to do a lot of things to support employee well-being. But I also know from talking to the paramedics that they were cynical, because actually what they really wanted was to be able to have some meal breaks and to finish on time, which were much bigger systemic changes that couldn't just be fixed. So it was sad that the best intentions of the organisation to do things to support weren't getting engagement because of wider problems. So you kind of have got to make it a bigger strategic thing. I keep seeing one new message and I go down and then I'm losing the trail of the thing. So
it's all right. Joe's put an interesting thought, Marion. It's relatively easy to get exec sign-off and ownership. The challenge is the middle layer who don't get the space and break from stress to change behaviours. It needs to be part of how we measure effective management, supported by training to build leadership.
Yes. Yeah, we do. We have to be measuring the successes. And I think that's part of the wellbeing. A lot of the things with that positive bit, you can measure. It's easier to measure the gaps. It's easier to measure an absence than it is to measure actually somebody's been 10% more productive because they're feeling better. So it is that data, how you actually find that data. And Jerry, I'm quite happy with there being cakes once in a while anyway. So yes, I did get the healthy bit. And just looking at the time, we better start to wrap it up. But I'm always happy to carry on conversations. You can find me on LinkedIn. And say the aim today wasn't to give you lots of quick answers as much as anything. I just wanted to encourage thinking and help you ask more questions and challenge things more in your organisation. So thank you for taking the time to be here.
Thanks, Marion. We'll send out some correspondence to everyone that signed up for the event, and I'll put a post on LinkedIn. So if you would like a copy of the slides and Marion's information, then please put a comment against the LinkedIn post. Our next event is next Thursday, this time next week, and is called Culture is a Contact Sport. A link to that will be included in the email. If anyone is recruiting, we've also got FD recruit, exec recruit, accountancy recruit, and charity recruit within the group. But otherwise, I'd just like to say a massive thank you to you, Marion, for your time and effort in putting everything together, and also to everybody for tuning in. Thank you. Hope to see you next week.